The Baltimore Ravens' full 2025 schedule is officially out, and we react to it, go game by game, breaking down Baltimore's opponents, the schedule quirks, their bye week, and how the season could end up going for the Ravens because of where teams are positioned on that schedule. All that and more coming up on an instant reaction edition of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day, your first listen each and every single day, or maybe this is your third listen because you've listened to our morning episode and our episode after Derrick Henry signed a massive extension with the team. So we've been very busy here on Locked On Ravens. Appreciate everybody who has been watching or listening to our content. And of course, if you're an everydayer, thank you for tuning in. If you're a first-time listener, thank you as well. And if you're somewhere in the middle, thanks for being a listener of the show or a watcher as well. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Baltimore's full 2025 schedule, it is officially out. And we're going to be reacting to it here on Locked On Ravens. We'll go game by game. We'll break it all down. We'll talk about some of those schedule quirks as well, because look, there are always some of those when you talk about schedules, little divisional things, teams going on the road for a certain amount of games. Maybe the Ravens will have a big home stand. So those are all things we'll talk about. We'll also do an initial record prediction. So I'm going to do my full early record prediction on tomorrow's show, so you don't want to miss out on that. But we're just going to go, look, instant reaction, game by game, break it all down here on Locked On Ravens. So let's just dive right into it here. I have the graphic. I'm going to pull it up quickly. Appreciate everybody again for checking in. And if you're listening to this after the fact, thank you as well. Right now you have Baltimore. They are going to start their season off with a bang. They're going to Buffalo, week 1, Sunday night football. That's going to be Baltimore's first game. Then they travel back home. They will play the Browns in week 2 in their home opener. They get the Lions in week 3. Chiefs, they're going to go to Arrowhead in week 4. Texans are week 5. Rams are week 6. Then you got that week 7 bye. Definitely don't hate the week 7 bye. Maybe a tad earlier than I would have possibly liked it, but you know what? It's right in that sweet spot. I think week 8 through 10 is that massive sweet spot. Week 7 and 11, you would take that. So week 7 is okay with me. Then you got the Bears, the Dolphins on Thursday night football, the Vikings, and then the Browns. And week 12 is the Jets. Week 13, they're playing the Bengals on Thanksgiving under the lights. Week 14, you got the Steelers. Week 15, you got the Bengals, the Patriots, and week 16, the Packers, and week 17, and the Steelers. Or week 18. They will end their year with 2 road games, and they'll finish their season at Heinz Field, or it's actually now called Acrisure Stadium. This schedule, honestly, is all right. There are definitely some tough challenges and breaks in here for them, but there are also some things that, you know, I feel like the Ravens, they like in their schedule here. So I want to talk about those first and foremost. I think my big takeaways initially is that they do have the 4 primetime games, including the one on Thanksgiving. And then you have the bye week, which does come a tad early, but it's right in that sweet spot, as I talked about. Those first 6 games are pretty brutal. That's a pretty brutal opening stretch that you have going on there, obviously, with the first 4 being a big catalyst of maybe how the season starts off. But as we all know from last year, that early stretch does not necessarily define you, but if you start slow, it could certainly have implications on how it actually could go in terms of seeding. Because look, if the Ravens beat either Kansas City or Las Vegas last year in weeks 1 or 2, we'd be talking about them playing the divisional round at home instead of in Buffalo, which could have figured, you know, could have honestly been a big reason if Baltimore would have won that game, why they would have won the game. So I think, to me, and just pulling back up the graphic, you're going to face a lot of division winners. You know, you're facing 5 division winners in your first 6 games, which is unreal. Bills in the AFC East, Lions in the North, Chiefs in the AFC West. You got the Texans in the South, and then the Rams are going to be your, obviously, NFC West. So you're facing 5 division winners in the first 6 weeks of the season, and it kind of lightens up for you as the schedule goes on. But honestly, there are some teams in here like the Vikings, the Patriots, depending on how you feel about them, are possibly intriguing. The Bears with Caleb Williams, the Packers, I think, are going to make some noise this season. And then, you got those divisional games, which are pesky. So I think that the heavyweight matchups are on the left side there, on the early season portion of your schedule. But you still have challenges, including the fact that you face 5 of your 6 divisional opponents, like 5 of those 6 divisional games. They're going to be from week 11 on. We know how tough, how grueling those divisional games can be. The only divisional game prior to week 11 is going to be that Browns game in week 2. So remember, I think it was a couple of years ago, Baltimore had their, what was it? There was, they played all of their like AFC North road games by the time week 5 was over. Like they were done with their AFC North road games by the time week 5 was done. That is not what Baltimore is facing this year, right? There are going to be times in the latter part of this season where we're going to be talking, could even be that week 18 game against Pittsburgh at Acrisure, where you're like, man, that's going to be super physical. These guys are worn down. And that's why, again, and if you know me and know what I've been talking about from a bye week perspective from them, it's going to be a lot of long football games down the road here, where week 7 will give you a nice early-ish, mid-ish season reset. Right? It'll give you time to rest, relax, and get your body right. But you're playing from then on out. There's no bye week to save you like there was last year, where I had talked about that bye week being very late for Baltimore during our schedule release last season. But look, if we're all being honest, that schedule release actually helped Baltimore with their bye week, because that bye week could not have come at a more perfect time for the Ravens. So look, the first 4, it's going to define a lot of different things for you, but it's not the make or break in terms of Baltimore is going to, their season is done if they lose their first 2 games. Because look, we saw that last year and the sky was falling for everyone. If they had fallen into that 0-3 hole against Dallas, we would have had to have a different conversation. But I'm excited for Baltimore to kind of get tested early on here. Plus, that week 1 game injuries, hopefully, look, there could be preseason, offseason stuff. Obviously, Darius Washington, that news is really tough, but that's going to be the healthiest that those 2 teams are regular season-wise, right? It's best on best there, and I think that'll give us a good barometer of where Baltimore actually is against one of the teams they're competing with for the AFC crown, and we'll get into more of a game-by-game breakdown as we move along here. Second and third parts of the show, we'll do some record predictions as well, initial record predictions, which we'll get to in the final part of the show. But the Ravens, there are years where it will be home away, like very back and forth with that. And quickly here, Jason, no West Coast trip this year. The Ravens are actually traveling the 3rd least amount of miles this year for all the NFL teams. Only the Bills and the Bengals travel less than they do. So no West Coast trip for Baltimore, which I think does help them. But for right now, you have the first game is away, but then you have 2 at home, and then 1 game away, and then 3 more at home. So let's see. Let me count this up quickly here. 5 of your first 7 games are going to be at home. You're going to have a lot of games at home to start the year. You want to start off with a bang at home, and you want to keep going, right? Your 2 toughest games in the stretch are going to be on the road, the Bills and the Chiefs. But you don't want to waste home stretches and home stands like that, where Baltimore is going to be at home from September 29th until October 28th or 29th when they travel to Miami to play the Dolphins on Thursday Night Football. They are going to be in Baltimore for a month. And they have to be able to capitalize on that for sure. That's one of those schedule quirks, right? Where you're going to have a lot of away games as the season goes along, because all of your home games are going to be used up earlier in the year. And that is evident because they have weeks 9 through 11 on the road. They have the last 2 games of their season on the road. Now, weeks 13 through 16, 3 of those 4 games, the home games are very chunked up. Just kind of, and again, this is my instant reaction. I'm kind of analyzing, going over the schedule as, we're all reacting to it here together. These home games are clumped up. There is not a standalone home game for the Ravens this year. I'm not counting the bye week. I'm factoring into this. I'm not counting the Bears game as a standalone game. That is in their 3-game home stretch. Their home games oh, no, I'm wrong. It's the Patriots. That Patriots game is their one standalone home game. All right, so now we got that established. One standalone home game. But other than that, it's 2, 3, and then 3. Those are all clumped up. And they got that one little Patriots game straggler that's kind of swimming along on its own there. I think it's interesting also, some of these short weeks the Ravens are going to have to go on here, especially when it comes to the Bears-Dolphins, right? That's going to be a quick turnaround, and that is going from home to away. Away to home is better in those instances because you don't have to factor in the travel there. You travel home. If it was Bears away, Dolphins home, but it's the opposite. So that's something that I think is something to keep an eye on as well. And then you also look at the Thanksgiving game against the Bengals here, where it's going to give you 7. Wait, where's the – no. Yeah, here we go. From 11:23 to 11:27, that's home. So that to me is good, where you don't have to travel to Cincinnati to play that game. But still, you're going to have a long rest before a physical game against the Steelers. I believe the Ravens will have the rest advantage there. And then they're going to have the rest advantage playing a Vikings team that I personally think is going to be pretty good this time around this year. So we're going to see. But a very intriguing schedule. We'll continue breaking it down here in the second part of the show as we dive into it, because there are a bunch of quirks that are in the Ravens' favor, a bunch of other quirks that might not be. So be sure to stay tuned for that. A lot coming your way here on this Instant Reaction Live edition of Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments, whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player. There's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Denver Nuggets Game 6 is coming up tomorrow. I am a nervous wreck for it. The Nuggets have to win 2 games to advance to the Western Conference Finals, and I'm going all in on the Nuggets. I'm going over on Nikola Jokic points, over Jamal Murray points, over Russell Westbrook points. We're going Russ in this game, and I'm doing that all over on FanDuel. And how could $200 in bonus bets add to the excitement if your first $5 bet hits? Well, trust me, it would be very exciting if that were to be the case. So if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. We're back on Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still breaking the Ravens' schedule down. Schedule came out at the time of this recording about 40 minutes ago. The Ravens had a very, honestly, pretty wild and mysterious schedule release video. It was very well produced, but definitely kind of out of the ordinary when it comes to that. They had a lot of guys acting in it. Jordan Stout, Tyler Linderbaum, Keaton Mitchell, a lot of other guys acting. It was a 7-minute schedule release. And if you haven't checked out what Ravens Productions was able to do with that, Tyler Wallace was in this, be sure to go check it out, because it is it is cinema, as people are calling it. So the Chargers team obviously does a great job. They had a Minecraft one. Cal Van Noy was in this, Kyle Hamilton. They had a lot of people, Charlie Kohler as well. So I think for me, let's get into some of the things here that I think will be the toughest parts of Baltimore's schedule, right? Let's just talk about the difficult parts of Baltimore's schedule here. I think early on when it comes to the Ravens schedule, we talked about those first 4 and honestly those first 6, right? Those first 6 games are going to be a pretty tough challenge for Baltimore, and, going up against pretty good competition, right? Division winners, and, going to Park, to Arrowhead, a Texans team that I personally do expect to fall off. Like I don't. Maybe other people are high on Houston. I'm not high on Houston this year. I think the Dolphins are going to take a step back. So there are those games against those teams where you're like, I don't really believe. Like I feel like the Ravens might split against Pittsburgh. Like we'll see how that all unfolds. But those first 6 games, I mean, look, if you come out of that, and honestly, if you're live with us in the chat, or if you're in the comments in the video form or audio form aspect of the show, I want to hear your opinion. First 6 games of the year, how confident would you be feeling if the Ravens were, let's say, 3-3? Would that be okay with the teams they're playing? And again, I'll pull back up the graphic so we can have, if you're here on YouTube with us, I'm obviously going to read them out as well in the audio form. Don't worry about that. It's the same show, both audio and video. Bills, Browns, Lions, Chiefs, Texans, Rams. Is 3-3 kind of a sweet spot for people? Is it 4-2 is what would make it be feeling confident? Would you be okay with a 2-4? I would not be okay with a 2-4. I think 3-3 is probably your worst case scenario, right? I would say I would not be feeling great after if it's 3-3. Now, that doesn't reflect on the teams Baltimore is playing. Like that, it's a really challenging schedule. But it's not just the Ravens are playing good teams. The Ravens also are a good team, right? So when you're talking about the Ravens, I'd be okay with 4-2, right? 5-1 would be great. 6-0 would be absolutely incredible. Now, I don't know where that first loss comes in. We'll do a game-by-game breakdown in the final part of the show and kind of go over my thoughts and the chat's thoughts for wins and losses here. But 3-3 honestly would be kind of disappointing because I think you're honestly booking wins, in my opinion, against the Browns and the Texans. I think those are two games that I feel pretty. And again, the Ravens always have one. It's every year. It's like clockwork, and it's so frustrating. They always have one of those games that you expect them to just blow out a team, and then they lose it by 3 points. That easily could be Joe Flacco coming to Baltimore in week 2 and just, destroying Baltimore's defense for no reason, which Joe, please, your Baltimore legend, you can add to your legend status by helping the Ravens get a win in week 2. But, you always have to factor in that game somewhere. I just hope it doesn't come in that first 6-week stretch because there are so many good teams on that schedule. And again, Baltimore is a good team there as well, but that's kind of the stretch that I'm looking at. And we kind of talked about it the same way last year too, although there was that middle stretch last season that we talked about and the end of season stretch after their bye week. But I think the bye week is less of a, I don't want to say it's less of a concern, but it certainly comes a tad-ish early. But I think the big thing that I'm also looking at here is definitely that Steelers, Bengals, like for honestly, I keep looking, I keep going further back on the schedule and I'm like, man, all these games are important. From week 14, no, I keep going back, week 13. Oh, and there goes my light. From week 13 on, you got Bengals, Patriots, Packers, and Steelers. That is not an easy stretch. That is two teams in the division that can give you difficulties. Now, I'm not necessarily over the moon about Cincinnati this year. I mean, I don't trust their defense. Those games will probably be kind of similar to what they were last year. The Ravens probably win those games 36-35 or something along those lines. But, you kind of look at it and that Bengals game kind of jumpstarts this for me, where it's 4 really important divisional games, and sandwiched in between those games is a Patriots team that's up and coming. I would still expect Baltimore to win that game. I'd be pretty disappointed if they weren't able to get to Drake May and company there. And then a Packers team that a lot of people are very excited about this season. So it's not just about that early season stretch, but I think it's also about how you close. I think the part of the schedule where you feel good and you'd feel disappointed. I feel like that week 8 to week 12 stretch is going to be where Baltimore has to rack up wins. Bears and Caleb Williams, Dolphins and Tua, Vikings and a rookie. Well, he's technically second year, but, first year playing there, and J.J. McCarthy, the Browns again, and then the Jets and Justin Fields. Honestly, 5-0 there might be what you have to go, especially because depending on how the early part of the season goes, you can figure out kind of what you need to do in the middle and end parts of the season. If Baltimore does have a really good start to the year in those first 6 games and they go 5-1 or 6-0, they can afford to have a couple of stinkers in there. They can afford to, in those 5 games of what I would call kind of the easy part of their schedule, they can afford to go 4-2 maybe, right? Because you took care of business against the tougher opponents. But if you go 3-3 or it gets really bad and you go 2-4, you have to go 5-0. You have to at least stay in contention. And then you have to really pick it up towards the end of the season. Because we were talking, remember last season after the Ravens lost to Philly before their bye week, we were talking about them, oh man, they're going to have to turn it on. The stretch is coming. They have to blow out the Giants, get on a run. And that's what they did. That's what they did. That was an easy part of their schedule. And they got the job done. So to me, part of the reason why we felt that way was because they were playing poorly and the fact that they started the season 0-2 and they had to dig themselves out of that hole. So my big thing for Baltimore is I just don't want them to dig themselves a hole because we know they can climb out of it, but it puts you behind the 8 ball and it kind of screws you over a little bit when it comes to the seeding. So I don't really know for Baltimore how they're going to approach things here. Traveling to Buffalo is no easy task in week 1. And yeah, I see Jacob saying Buffalo has an easy schedule. I haven't seen Buffalo's schedule. I'll try to find it, but I have seen that it's going to be, it's going to be easy for them, at least compared to some of the other teams here. So we will figure out what Baltimore has on the table after the first 6 weeks. But if it's 4-2, I'm feeling pretty good. 5-1, I'm feeling very good. 6-0, oh man. I'm feeling very, very good about that because then Baltimore would be able to be in the driver's seat, not only for the AFC North as you come up on those divisional games, but honestly for a top seed in the AFC. So coming up in the final part of the show, we will go game by game. We will predict the wins. We will predict the losses initially. So be sure to stay tuned. Plenty coming your way here on Locked On Ravens. Back on Locked On Ravens, we are live here breaking down the Ravens schedule. If you are live with us on YouTube, appreciate you checking in for maybe even the second time for you today because we did react earlier. Derrick Henry signing a massive extension with the Ravens. If you haven't checked out that live, be sure to do so. We also had an episode this morning breaking down replacements in free agency for Darius Washington and internally for him as well. So very busy content day. We're a 5-day-a-week Daily Ravens podcast. So Monday through Friday, we have your regularly scheduled weekday episodes at 6 a.m. Then we go live after Ravens games, after pieces of big news like this. And it's been awesome being able to host the show since 2019. And I cannot wait to continue on the journey here on Locked On Ravens. Now let's get into some prediction time. I think this is probably what some people have been waiting for. And we're going to do it. We're going to make it. If you're live with us, be sure to put your opinions on the games in the chat. And if you are not live with us, put it in the comments or message me on Twitter if you're listening in audio form or in the comments in audio form. I really want to hear how everybody's feeling about the schedule. So let's go game by game. Let's break it down initially. First up, we got the Bills on Sunday Night Football. I mean, look, this is going to be about the toughest test Baltimore could have endured to start their season. I think a lot of people feel like the Bills are better than the Chiefs on paper this season, even though the Chiefs have the experience advantage. Baltimore. I wish Buffalo lost. Baltimore lost by, a couple of bad turnovers in the playoffs. This was a team that dominated the Bills in week 4 last season in prime time. Derrick Henry was the star there. This is the regular season. So the Bills in week 1, I'm going to say they win this game. I'm going to say Buffalo loses to Baltimore in week 1. Baltimore gets the job done. I think they have a sour taste in their mouth, 1, from what happened last year in week 1, and 2, obviously what happened in the divisional round. So I think that Baltimore wins this game. I think it'll be a close game. I still don't trust, but the Buffalo's made additions to that defense. I just don't fully trust them against Derrick Henry. And this is not the playoffs. So, you can't have any questions about Lamar in the postseason there. So I am going to go with the Ravens being 1-0 after week 1. Week 2, I say Joe Flacco magic does not come to Baltimore. Joe will come to Baltimore. The magic will not follow him, though. I will say Baltimore wins that game, and I'll say they win it handedly. Cleveland's just a bad team. Their quarterback situation is in the gutter right now. They don't have a lot outside of Myles Garrett, and I don't believe in them. I'm not going to believe them until I see it. So Cleveland, I'm going to say that is a win for Baltimore. They are 2-0. Week 3, Monday Night Football. I say that the Ravens win this game too. I think they start 3-0. The Lions are a team that Baltimore dominated the last time that they met up. Actually, Rocky Yassin had a moment in that game. He flipped over Amon-Ra St. Brown. I'm not sure it'll be like that because I think Detroit is a more talented team than they were a couple of years ago. But the Ravens always seem to play well under the lights. This is a home game, so I'm going to say they win that game. Week 4 against the Chiefs, I'll say Baltimore loses this one. I'll say Baltimore falls to the Chiefs. I say they lose this one, but they beat them in the playoffs. I'm going to say that because I feel like Kansas City's roster is getting older. It's not as good as it's been in recent seasons. I think this is early enough in the season for that not to affect Kansas City, and I think that voodoo magic might come out and it might be Baltimore. But I'm going to say that in the playoffs, Kansas City is going to be worn down, and Baltimore might not be. And I think that might be the difference. So I'm going to say they lose that Kansas City game. I don't want to say it, but I will say that they're going to lose to the Chiefs, and that's going to be their first loss of the year. Texans game, I say they win that game. I'm not high on the Texans whatsoever. They're not going to have Tank Dell. They lost Stephon Diggs. They have a couple of intriguing rookie wide receivers to go along with Nico Collins, but the Ravens might have 8 sacks in this game. They might have 8. Their offensive line is awful. They traded away Laremy Tunsil. They're rebuilding that line behind CJ Stroud. And, while they do have Will Anderson, Danielle Hunter, Jalen Petrie, Derek Stingley, that defense has dudes on it. Christian Harris. It's a very good defense. I feel like Baltimore's offense will be able to get the better of that. And then I think the Baltimore we all saw the game against Houston on Christmas. Houston couldn't even play the game. Baltimore had him in jail the whole game. So maybe it won't be like that, but I'm going to say the Ravens win that game. So now they are 4-1. I do say they fall to 4-2 though against the Rams. I think they lose that game. Look, the Rams are a good team. I know that on paper, people might be like, well, what do you mean? The Rams are? No, they are. They're a good team. Matthew Stafford is still doing his thing. He came back to Los Angeles. Certainly not prime Matthew Stafford, but very serviceable. I think they upgraded from Cooper Kupp to Devontae Adams, and obviously you still have Puka Nacua over there, Kyron Williams, and I think that for me, it'll be interesting to see, kind of what happens with some of their defensive players. But, we saw that Rams game a couple of years ago. Tylan Wallace was the hero. That was a really good game. I'll say that they lose to the Rams. The Rams might want to get some revenge in that game. So, look, Rams are a good team. No shame. 4-2. I'd say that's a pretty good way to go head into this bye week. Then I think the Ravens go on a bit of a run here. I say they beat the Bears in week 8. I think they destroy the Dolphins in week 9 on Thursday Night Football. I think they lose to the Vikings in week 10. I think going to Minnesota, I think they'll lose to the Vikings in week 10. So what are we at now? We are – can't even do math right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So they've played 8 games. They're 4. They're 5-3, right? They're 5-3 right now. I think they're 5-3 because we have them beating the Bills, beating the Lions, beating the Browns, beating the Texans, beating the Bears. So they're 6. They're 6-3. They're 6-3. It's been a long day. They're 6-3 right now. So they lose to the Vikings to move them down to 6-3 on the year. I think they then beat the Browns in week 11. They beat the Jets in week 12. So now they're 8-3. All right. The math game is getting up here. I think they blow out the Bengals on Thanksgiving at home. I know that might be a hot take because of the Bengals offense, but that defense is so bad. And I think the Ravens defense got better. I just do. So I think they beat the Bengals on Thanksgiving. I think they lose to the Steelers in week 14. It just feels natural they're going to split with the Steelers in week 14. I don't know. It just feels that way. The Steelers always seem to have Baltimore's number. So I'm going to say that they end up losing to the Steelers there. So now they are, I don't even remember what they were. I'm just going to say they're 9-4. I have no idea what they are right now. They're 9-4. Week 15, I think that they beat the Bengals again. Week 16, I think they beat the Patriots. Week 17, I think they lose to the Packers in week 17. And then week 18, I think they beat the Steelers. So 12-5 is my prediction for the Ravens this season. But I could easily see them being 13-4. And the one game that I probably would take off is the Vikings. The JJ McCarthy thing, I would probably say. So if they were to go 13-4, I would probably say that they beat the Vikings. But right now, and look, this is my literal initial reaction to this. This is obviously subject to change. I'm just kind of going through the quirks of the schedule, figuring things out. Sometimes we see the Ravens struggle after short weeks. Sometimes we see them struggling after long weeks. So I'm going to go with 12-5, but easily could be 13-4, depending on how you feel about the Vikings game, which honestly could realistically be a win if they can get to JJ McCarthy and rattle him. I have them losing to the Vikings close, but the more I think about it, the more I might want to turn that game. And I'm going to get to my final predictions on tomorrow's show. So again, this is just initial reactions, my initial thoughts as I'm kind of talking it through live after first seeing it. But tomorrow I'm going to go through the win-loss. We're going to have the graphic. We're going to go through the whole thing. So we're going to get into a little more depth on these games. But I think it's a schedule that broke fine for the Ravens, right? It's a schedule that broke fine. I don't feel like at the end of the day, the Ravens got too hosed by the NFL. The bye week could have been a little later. But I just feel like that early season stretch plus the early bye week, that's going to take a lot out of this team. They're going to have to respond accordingly. Because if you can come out of that stretch, okay, I had them at 4-2. 4-2 is okay for me. And especially heading into, I think, a pretty decently easy stretch of 5 games that you can really capitalize momentum on. And look, if you have best case scenario there and you're 4-2 heading into your bye, and then right before that Thanksgiving game, you are 9-2, that looks pretty good. Even if you're 8-3 before Thanksgiving, that looks very good as well. So right now, I think that the divisional stretch at the end of the season is going to be tough because those games are always so crazy, so wacky, really wonky as well. But let's just go over it one more time here before we pop out of here. It's the Bills, Browns, Lions, Chiefs, then Texans, Rams. They got their bye week in week 7. Bears, Dolphins, Vikings, Browns. Got the Jets, the Bengals, the Steelers, then the Bengals again, Patriots, Packers, and Steelers once more. So, man, I'll tell you, it's going to be an interesting season for Baltimore. Going to be a lot of high-stakes games early on, and we're going to see how it pans out for this team. But I appreciate everybody popping in here to the live stream, our second of the day. It is done. We have completed it, but that doesn't mean the content stops. We'll be right back here tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. Eastern time. We will be breaking down the schedule in even more depth. We'll be doing another record prediction just as we figure things out and continue to analyze. So on the way out, hit the like and subscribe button in video form, follow along in audio form, and I will see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.